The ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, often referred to as the Book of Going Forth by Day, provides a complex vision of death, the afterlife, and resurrection. These three interconnected themes are at the heart of Egyptian religious beliefs and reveal how they viewed existence itself. For the Egyptians, death was not simply the cessation of life, it was a profound transition into another realm. The afterlife was a perilous, yet promising continuation of life where the deceased could attain eternal bliss, but only if they successfully navigated its dangers. Resurrection was the ultimate goal, a reconstitution of the soul and body that granted the deceased eternal life. In this episode, we explore these major themes, using the Book of the Dead as our guide. In ancient Egyptian culture, death was not viewed as the end of existence. Rather, it was a transition, a journey from the physical realm to the spiritual. But this journey was not guaranteed to end in eternal life unless the deceased was properly prepared. The Book of the Dead provided the essential tools and knowledge needed to ensure that this journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, was successful. The Egyptians believed that the soul of the deceased embarked on a perilous journey through the Duat, a realm filled with dangers, including malevolent spirits, gates guarded by terrifying deities, and treacherous paths. As Jan Assmann highlights, the concept of death in Egypt was similar to an initiation ritual. It was not simply the cessation of life, but a transformative process through which the soul would be judged and purified before it could hope to achieve eternal life. One of the central challenges the deceased faced was overcoming the physical separation of the body and soul. Egyptians believed that the soul was composed of several parts, including the ka, which represented the vital essence, and the ba, which was often depicted as a human-headed bird and symbolized the personality. These aspects of the soul needed to reunite after death for resurrection to occur. The preservation of the physical body through mummification was crucial to this process, as the ka would require a well-preserved body to return to. The Egyptians went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the deceased was properly equipped for the afterlife. The mummification process itself could take up to 70 days, and it was not simply a practical preservation of the body but a deeply religious process. The deceased's body was dried, embalmed, and wrapped in linen, with specific amulets placed between the layers of cloth to provide protection and spiritual assistance. Amulets such as the heart scarab were believed to prevent the heart from betraying the deceased during the weighing of the heart ceremony, while others, like the Eye of Horus, ensured protection from evil forces. Throughout this journey, the deceased would encounter numerous obstacles. For example, spell 72 of the Book of the Dead protects the deceased from being imprisoned or trapped by enemies in the afterlife, while spell 32 provides guidance on how to avoid the snares of malevolent spirits. These spells were essential for overcoming the dangers of the Duat, ensuring that the soul could continue its journey unimpeded. Death, in the Egyptian worldview, was a profound passage, but it was fraught with danger. The Book of the Dead served as a map, a guidebook filled with practical instructions and magical spells designed to equip the deceased with the necessary tools to survive the journey. This is why funerary texts were so integral to burial practices. They were not just religious texts, but essential guides for the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was not a passive existence, but a realm of opportunity, where life continued in a perfected form. The field of reeds, their version of paradise, was a mirror of life on earth, but free of suffering, where the deceased could farm, socialize, and enjoy eternal contentment. But reaching this realm required passing through the trials of the underworld and, most importantly, receiving a favorable judgment from Osiris, the god of the dead. The journey through the afterlife was full of peril. The Book of the Dead provided detailed instructions and spells to guide the deceased past the many challenges they would face, including hostile spirits, monsters, and gods who guarded the gates to the afterlife. However, the final test, and perhaps the most significant, was the weighing of the heart ceremony. In this crucial moment, the deceased's heart, which was believed to hold all of their deeds and thoughts, was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was free of sin and lighter than the feather, the deceased was granted access to the field of reeds, a paradise where they would live for eternity. But if the heart was heavier, weighed down by guilt and sin, the soul would be devoured by the fearsome creature Amit, a beast that was part lion, part crocodile, and part hippopotamus. In this case, the deceased would face the second death, total annihilation, with no chance of resurrection. This concept of moral purity was central to Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. The deceased would recite the negative confessions, a series of declarations found in spell 125 of the Book of the Dead, proclaiming their innocence of various sins such as theft, lying, and murder. These confessions were made before Osiris and 42 divine judges, each representing a different moral aspect of the Egyptian worldview. The confession not only demonstrated the deceased's adherence to Ma'at during their life, but also served as a magical formula to protect them from judgment. The emphasis on moral purity is a reflection of the Egyptians' deep-seated belief that the afterlife was not a right, but something that had to be earned through righteous living. This is why the Book of the Dead is filled with references to living in accordance with Ma'at. The deceased needed to show that they had lived a balanced life, upholding truth and justice, and that they were worthy of entering the eternal paradise. Once they passed the trials and the final judgment, the deceased would be admitted to the Field of Reeds, a heavenly version of Egypt where the landscape was fertile, the fields abundant, and the skies always clear. In the Field of Reeds, the deceased could continue many of the same activities they enjoyed during life, working, socializing, and enjoying sustenance, but without the pain, toil, or suffering that came with earthly existence. Resurrection was the ultimate goal of every Egyptian's journey through the afterlife. But it was more than just the reanimation of the body, it was a profound spiritual transformation. To be resurrected was to become divine, to be reborn into a state of eternal existence where the soul would be united with the gods. In the Book of the Dead, resurrection involved the reunion of the Ka, Ba, and physical body. The Ka was the vital life force that animated the body in life, while the Ba represented the individuality and personality of the deceased. After death, these components were separated, but through the proper rituals and spells, they could be reunited, ensuring that the deceased could live again in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that the model for resurrection was Osiris, the god of the underworld. According to the Osiris myth, he was murdered by his brother Seth, but was brought back to life through the magic of his wife, Isis. Osiris's resurrection symbolized the promise of eternal life, and the deceased sought to follow his example. The deceased was often identified with Osiris, and in the Book of the Dead, they would recite spells that aligned them with the god, such as spell 30b, which includes the declaration, "I am Osiris." Resurrection in ancient Egypt was not a mere return to physical life, it was an ascension to a divine form of existence, where the deceased would live eternally alongside the gods. This concept of resurrection transcended the physical realm, as it symbolized the deceased's passage into a higher, divine state. The journey of resurrection was depicted in the Book of the Dead through various spells, such as spell 89, which provided the deceased with the ability to transform into different divine forms, thus allowing them to move freely between the living world and the afterlife. One of the most important aspects of resurrection was the reconstitution of the deceased's spiritual and physical essence. As discussed by J. Assman, the ancient Egyptians saw resurrection as the final culmination of the soul's journey through death. It was not simply a return to life, but the attainment of divine immortality, in which the Ka and Ba were rejoined with the physical body, and the soul could live eternally in the Field of Reeds, free from the limitations of earthly existence. The Egyptians were deeply concerned with ensuring that the deceased would be equipped for this transformation. The physical preservation of the body through mummification was essential to resurrection. Without a well-preserved body, the Ka could not return, and the deceased would be unable to achieve eternal life. Spells in the Book of the Dead, such as spell 105, provided the necessary guidance for reuniting the soul and body, ensuring that the deceased would emerge victorious in their quest for resurrection. But resurrection was not just a personal event. It was a communal one, linking the deceased with the gods, particularly Osiris, and with their ancestors who had successfully navigated the trials of the afterlife. The deceased would often be depicted in tomb paintings and on sarcophagi alongside Osiris, symbolizing their identification with the god of the underworld and their hope for eternal life. In this way, resurrection was a unifying theme in Egyptian religion, connecting the individual with the divine and the cosmos itself. Osiris's resurrection also embodied the larger cycle of life, death, and rebirth that was central to Egyptian cosmology. Just as the sun rose and set each day, so too did Osiris die and rise again. This cycle was mirrored in the agricultural world, where the Nile's annual flooding brought fertility and renewal to the land. The Egyptians saw the resurrection of the dead as part of this natural cycle. Death was a temporary state, followed by the eternal renewal of life, both in the physical world and in the afterlife. Ultimately, resurrection in the Egyptian worldview was more than just an individual spiritual ascent, it was a reaffirmation of the cosmic order. By undergoing resurrection, the deceased helped maintain Ma'at, the balance of truth, justice, and order that governed the universe. The Book of the Dead provided the key to this resurrection, offering not only the spells needed for transformation, but also the moral guidance necessary to ensure that the deceased had lived a life worthy of eternal rebirth. No figure was more central to the concept of resurrection in ancient Egypt than Osiris, the god of the dead and rebirth. Osiris's story is one of death, dismemberment, and ultimately resurrection. As the god who overcame death, he provided the model for all Egyptians seeking to achieve eternal life. According to the Osiris myth, Osiris was a wise and just ruler, beloved by his people. However, his jealous brother Seth conspired to kill him, trapping him in a coffin and throwing it into the Nile. Osiris's wife, Isis, searched for her husband's body, eventually recovering it and using her magic to resurrect him. In this process, Osiris transcended death, becoming the ruler of the underworld and the judge of souls. The Osiris myth is deeply intertwined with the resurrection of the dead in the Book of the Dead. The deceased were often referred to as Osiris in the funerary texts, and they sought to follow in his footsteps, undergoing their own resurrection after death. By invoking the name of Osiris and reciting the proper spells, the deceased hoped to identify with the god and achieve the same eternal life that he embodied. In the Hall of Ma'at, where the final judgment took place, Osiris presided over the weighing of the heart ceremony. Spell 30b of the Book of the Dead is one of the most significant spells in this context. It is a plea to the heart, asking it not to betray the deceased during the judgment. The heart was seen as the seat of emotions, memory, and character. Therefore, it was essential that the heart remain pure, as it held the key to the final judgment before Osiris. The spell begins with the famous line, "O my heart, do not stand up against me as a witness," encapsulating the anxiety surrounding this moment of truth. Once the deceased had passed this critical test, they were allowed to enter the field of reeds, where they would enjoy eternal life, just as Osiris had been resurrected to rule over the underworld. The field of reeds was a mirror image of life on earth, but free from the pain, suffering, and toil of mortal existence. Here, the deceased would live in harmony with the gods, enjoying the blessings of eternal peace and abundance. The identification with Osiris was not limited to kings or the elite. By the time of the New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1070 BCE, the Book of the Dead had become widely accessible, allowing even commoners to partake in the promise of resurrection. Through the recitation of spells, the proper funerary rites, and a morally righteous life, any Egyptian could hope to follow the path of Osiris and achieve eternal life. The themes of death, afterlife, and resurrection are deeply woven into the fabric of the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. For the Egyptians, death was not an end but a transition, a passage that, with the right knowledge and moral purity, could lead to eternal life. The afterlife was a realm filled with trials, but it offered the promise of eternal happiness for those who passed the judgment of Osiris. And resurrection, the ultimate goal, was more than just a return to life, it was a transformation into a divine existence, an eternal rebirth. In our next episode, we will delve deeper into the specific rituals and symbols associated with resurrection, exploring the tools that the Egyptians believed would ensure their journey to eternal life. Join us as we continue our exploration of the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead and uncover the secrets that have fascinated scholars and historians for millennia. If you found this episode enlightening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can stay updated with our series on the mysteries of ancient Egypt and the Egyptian Book of the Dead.